get nice and comfy.
Yeah. It's a good picture.
Some of the background sound. You can see yourself there. You look all right.
Oh yeah,
Your hair's done. You need some makeup or
no, not at all. I'm not that beautiful.
Cool. So look, I mean, I wanted to make this. You know, you've got a great story that you know, I've actually never heard it in full straight from you before either. I've kind of
It goes back a long way, of course. I mean, I thought you wanted to go.
Start at the beginning.
I was in a very, very poor place in Britain, in the northeast of England, in Newcastle, and I passed this scholarship that you took at 11 years old, and that allowed me to go to a grammar school, which was a private grammar school to a degree. It's called Dame Allen's School, and it was founded as the dames did, were to do with education. It was founded in 1706, and that was the school that I passed the scholarship for when I was 11 years old, and it was a wonderful introduction to the beginning of my education. And eventually, I was bound to not go to university. I could have, but my parents couldn't afford to send me there. We would have to find digs and pay for that as well. And so I left school when I was 16 and didn't go on to university, and started a student apprenticeship with the Cable Makers Association, and that set me off right the way. I won't go into all the details of, but I finished up the manager of Christmas Island and Ocean Island, which were phosphate manufacturing islands, and I was finished using. I got to manager level of those two islands, and it was a wonderful time for me to deal with Chinese and Malay workers and helpers, and it was a wonderful way to end my working. And I came to Australia, which was one of the joint partners with Britain to run those islands, and we decided they offered me a small job in Australia, and we wanted to do that with myself and my wife, and so that came to Australia. I just worked for another, maybe a year or something, and I think my memory tells me right, I stopped working when I was 57, and since then we've had a wonderful life together. Now I'm 90 years old, so that was 33 years ago that I stopped working, and now, you know, retired in a retirement village, which is a wonderful place to have the last years, and I'm here until that is the last years. So,
So what was your first job outside of the UK? Because I know you sort of left the UK when you were quite young with grandma just after mum was born.
Yes, it was in South Africa, in Rhodesia, Southern Rhodesia it was called. It was the very, very south tip of the African continent place, and I can't recall. It was electrical engineering. That's what I had, you know, that done, and I went to the southern tip of Africa, Rhodesia, and as an electrical engineer, and I was always taking more studies in management, and eventually I had a managing situation in Rhodesia, and then on two islands, sorry, Christmas Island and Nauru and Ocean Island, the three islands on the same powder that mined phosphate rock, and I went there as the electrical engineer, and ultimately was manager of Ocean Island and Christmas Island, and then Ocean Island. Nauru got their independence, so that wasn't anything of mine. And I was in those two islands until they would mine out the phosphate, and they were run mainly by the British Phosphate Commissioners, but it was Australia that were more involved with that mining. And so as a result, I came when the mining was almost finished in the islands. They offered me a job in Perth, in Australia, and since then, it was the right position for me, and the right action to come to Australia, and I've never I've never felt badly in that. It's been a wonderful life for myself and my wife Ina, and for the last 35 years, and we're still here, and I couldn't have done anything better than coming to Australia for the last 30 years. It's been a wonderful life for us.
How did you meet Grandma?
I met Grandma when I was a student apprentice with a cable company called Henry's Cables, and I met a girl who was the secretary of the manager called June, and she invited me to a party, and she was a friend of Ina, who ultimately became my wife. I met Ina at this party, and we got engaged and married, and we both wanted to see the world, and we tried, and more or less we saw a little bit of the world, didn't we?
Sure, you probably saw more than most people who grew up in Newcastle at the same time, right?
Well, definitely. I mean, our holidays took us to America and South Africa, and eventually we finished up in the Mediterranean and little islands producing phosphate. And when that was the islands were using, mining, and when it was finished, I was offered a job in Perth in West Australia. And it was a wonderful offer, and we took it, and we've been in West Australia in Perth ever since.
Are you working in the Middle East at some point, you said?
Yes, but it's my memory's not as good as it could be. And somewhere in the Middle East, between the islands that I took and the businesses that I was before that, I took a job in the Mediterranean in a country that I don't very much remember, but I remember the place I lived in, and that lived in with the children, and there's some funny things with the children, and I have not the memory of what the job was like. It was in a Middle Eastern country, but my memory's lost with it. I remember we were in an apartment in one of the Middle Eastern cities, and one of our children, close to the apartment, we could go on a small platform outside the apartment, and there was a building where a guy called people to prayers, and we loved. Well, I loved going, and I should show a couple of friends to the door and watch him. And he used to smile, and when he was and to us it was in Arabic, and the sounds was monk, monk, as if it was chipmunk, you know. And my mum would ask us, what are you? He's saying chipmunk. That's what we told him. It was quite a good memory, being a kid and something like that. It's and he was at his well, church or whatever. He was at or a Muslim, and his platform where he came to do that was on the same level as our. We were upstairs, but if we opened doors we had a veranda, and so we opened the doors on the veranda, and here's this guy calling chipmunk, calling people to prayers, and he used to look at us and smile, you know, because we just kids all those things that we did in you know. Not us kids, sorry, our kids, because I was a parent. You know, all sorts of things like that that we, you know, from South Africa to the Middle East and England, we worked in Australia, and all of those sorts of things. I met good memories. And you just have to, and Ina and I did want to see the world. We weren't. We were home beings, and we loved our. You know, our parents. Ina's mother was a wonderful lady. The father wasn't such a wonderful man, and my parents were really, really good. So we were brought up together on the same. And our friend that we met together because it was her birthday. We wouldn't have ever met if we hadn't took to the birthday party, you know, from the June's birthday party. And from there on, we did what we both wanted to do. You know, we wanted to travel and as much as we could. But you know, you don't get it for nothing, because you've got to work hard studying to get jobs to go to different places. You know, that's what I did. And we both wanted to do exactly the same thing. You know, see as much of the world as we could. And,
Did you always want to have 5 kids?
it was never planned at all. But each time, you know, we recognised that they've got to be looked after. What we did get help when it came to the school, because some of the places were, I mean, in Christmas Island and Ocean Island, there wasn't the proper education for our children. But Ina's mother was a wonderful, wonderful woman. She'd left her husband by this time, who was a nasty man. And so we put them into boarding school, and she looked after them in the short, you know, weekends or 3 or 4 days holidays that they had. And we made sure that when whatever I was doing in the big holidays, like, you know, the Christmas the summer holidays, you know, between, you know, May, June, July, August, we made sure that we were with the kids We took them to different places, you know, for holidays. It was, and they were happy because Ina's mother was a wonderful, wonderful woman. She'd stood this nasty, nasty guy for a long, but in the end, she left him and went to live with her mother, Ina's grandmother. And you couldn't have had a nicer lady than Ina's mother. But the father was, you know, I don't know how she ever got together with him. He was a clever guy in one way, but he felt that the world should have given him a better life. And he was bitter about it. Instead of just getting on to you know, get better jobs, he was just always sort of saying, "Oh, those buggers are going to do this, and those buggers do this, and they should be doing it to me," you know. That sort of attitude. He was a nasty guy in a sense. And his mother was, she left him and stayed to his grandmother, her mother. She just left him in the end. Then he was sort of was an intelligent, but he used his life badly. You know, he could have done far, far better, but he was bitter. He was always talking about what other people got and he didn't get. And you know, one of these guys who was as big as anything that they should be doing, they should be giving me the job, you know, all sorts of things like that. Yeah. So, Nina's brother, Ken, he was a wonderful, wonderful young man. I've forgotten who it was when he died. He was fairly young. He got some sort of a bad disease that brought him and eventually he died. He had married. He had just married. He was very, very young. Ken, and I didn't have any brothers or sisters. Talking about that, my grandmother tells me the story. When I was born, my mother was having really, really bad birth control, and when I was coming out, she was bleeding with the vagina, and the blood was all over the place. And my grandmother was in the room, and when I came out, I wasn't breathing, and the doctor was having to try to stop the bleeding, otherwise my mother would die. And I was breathing, and he thought I was just dead, so he threw me to the bottom of the bed. My grandmother, who was in the room, well, if she hadn't been in the room, I wouldn't be here. My grandmother picked me up, she was covered in blood coming out. She picked me up by the legs, she said, and I prayed you, and I prayed you, and I prayed you, and yeah, that was it. That was it. She brought me to life, I suppose, because I wasn't breathing. Yeah. And my mum's the bleeding was, you first come out, you start breathing air because you're not breathing air inside. But she was bleeding blood and all sorts, and I wasn't breathing, and the doctor couldn't do two things, so he threw me to the bottom of the bed. This is my grandmother's story. So he could save my mother's life, stop the bleeding. Yeah. And that happened. And my grandmother said, "I prayed you, and I prayed you, and I prayed you." And then he went, "Ah!" It's funny stories like that. But you've got to take.
And that was why you didn't have any brothers or sisters, because of your mum's
complications. Yeah, that's right, the complications. Yeah. And my grandmother, we lived in a very, very poor area in Elliott. We had a bedroom which didn't have any lights in it, and a sitting room which had one gas mantle. Those gas. It's a gas that lights, but you get the gas mantle, which is got a base, and it's this curved what's the name of the element that holds fire? It's asbestos, the sort of an asbestos thing. If you touched it, it would all fall because it was just. But when you lit it, the gas lit up the asbestos, and that was a gas light, and that's what we had. And we had them in the living room, but not in the bedroom. There was no light. It was all in the bedroom. And then there was a scullery which had a cold tap. So you didn't have any hot water or anything. It was very, very poor. My dad was a semi-skilled roofer, you know, putting on plate slates, you know, on putting roofs. And he was working for a London firm, so he was sent to Leeds and all over the place. So I didn't see much of him. And my mother, she had a sewing machine, and she could make clothes. She was a something else, I've forgotten it, but she was a tailoress. Yeah, and she made clothes, and she, you know, people brought things and said, "Can you make a pair of little trousers from a son's in school?" My mum would. At first, before we got electricity, she had to pedal this sewing machine.
Okay.
Yeah, and this pedal went like this, and the sewing machine sewed it. And until we got electricity or gas onto the house. Oh no, we had gas, but it wasn't. You couldn't use the machine for gas, so she had a pedal. But then they electrified the place, and we got the cables and whatnot. You know, she by then she was probably stopped sewing. But you know, I was an only child, and my mother was intelligent. My dad was a lovely guy, but he wasn't anywhere near my mum's intelligence, and it was from her that I was inherited the intelligence. But my dad was a redhead. He had ginger. He was a ginger-headed guy, but he was a lovely guy because he went out doing work on, you know, on roofs and things like that. He was just a manual job, you know. He wasn't a tradesman or anything. It's just, but my mum was making money sewing and making things for people, you know. So she was really beautiful. And the worst thing, we lived in this sort of the front door. You opened the front door, and the stairs went up to a flat that wasn't ours. There was a door on your right, and it went into the bedroom. That was the only one, and through the bedroom to the living room, and then there was a little scullery, and down some stairs into the backyard. And the toilet was the same toilet for the men upstairs, people upstairs, and they were downstairs. And I was there till I left, married. I lived there, and I went to grammar school, and Dame Allens, as I just mentioned, with his son. But it was a wonderful life because I could see, you know, the poorness of my grandma and granddad. You know, they hadn't any money, and my granddad could hardly walk. And I remember him; he used to shuffle down the stairs, and he had my grandma used to not very much given, but he had a tin jug, and you could walk down the back lane, and there was a hot, what do you call it? It's something license, a little pub thing that you could buy, and you went with his jug, and he got a pint of beer and walk back home, and that's what he had for his drink. And my grandmother went out in the city of Newcastle, cleaning offices, And actually, he couldn't. He was half. He could hardly walk down the stairs. Something was wrong with him, but I never ever found out. But he just shuffled, and he could shuffle across to the shop where he could get a pint of beer, and shuffle himself back home. But my grandma was the one that kept them, by scrubbing floors, and my mum couldn't give them too much. I think she tried to give them a little bit, and but she was trying to make money, and my dad wasn't a tradesman either. He was a roofer. He was called a roofer. And, but I think my sort of intelligence, if you like to call it, it's given to you. It's a gift. You can work. You've got to work, but it's a gift for the intelligence. My mum was much more intelligent than my dad. Not that he wasn't a nice guy, but she was clever. Yeah, but she just had a sewing machine and a gas mantle. Those sort of days, and those sort of the northeast of England, especially in the 1930s. They were born in 1905, and they were married in 27. That was 32, and I was born in 33. And then she only had the one child because she was bleeding to death. And when I was
what was it like being a child during the war?
oh well, you played your war games, and you shot the Nazis. You did. Because 39. I was 6, and the war ended in 45. So I was 12. I just went to grammar school. In fact, the grammar school that I went to, it was a private school, not a grammar school, private school, took in a few pupils. They had been evacuated, from Newcastle to the west coast of England, which wasn't bombed as much, and they shut the school down. And when I was 11, so that was 1944, they had just come back from because of the thing, Britain were winning the war, and they opened Dame Allen's again, and I got the scholarship and went through that school and that grammar school sort of thing. It was a private school, but they took in grammar. They took in a few pupils. They took the 11 plus, it was called. You took an exam to go to grammar schools or the private schools. And I took the exam at 11, 1944, when the war was even finished. And I chose Dame Allen's. It was a school that had been run by 1705 by ladies. Yeah. That's what's called Dame Allen's. Rich ladies, obviously. But it was a wonderful education for me. But it still was, I got to the stage I knew I could not go to university because my parents couldn't. Not the university was charging you, but the universities weren't local where we were living, and you would have to find digs, lodgings. And parents, mum says we can afford lodgings. Yeah. So I said, yeah, well, it doesn't matter, and I just left school, and between the ordinary exams and something certificate, the higher national and the ordinary national. I would pass the ordinary national, but I had to leave when I was 15 or 16 before the next that exam took you into university. And I knew my parents tried before to put me in university. They couldn't afford a job, but I was good enough that when I got a job, you could go to night school, and still keep studying. I took on studying electrical engineering so I don't know why I picked that, but I did. And I was doing 3 nights in one day, and the education is it advanced an awful lot. And a lot of the people you worked for had apprentices. We were student apprentices, trade apprentices also got a lower level, I suppose. They give you a day's off work to go to school, technical school. And I got 4 years of that, and you advance. So, and it was a really good firm that took me on, and I was a student apprentice. Henry's Cables it was, really, W.T. Henry's Telegraph Works. And it was a big cable, and they built a band. They bought an old cable factory in Berkeley. Berkeley was the little town that Vino lived in. And but this big company, Henry Cables, bought it, but they bought it because they had the cable makers. They built a brand new cable factory in Berkeley, the little town of Berkeley. And it was this, but what they had the expertise of all the people in that little cable factory, and they went to the new cable factory and got the best jobs, and that I got a student apprenticeship with that cable factory, the new one, and lived in Berkeley, and that's how I met it. It's just it's one of those things. But I never would look upon I'm cleverer than somebody else. I realised that I didn't spoil the cleverness. I thought, well, if I'm clever enough, I've got to put some work into it. And I dance, some sort of thought like that. And I got my mum and dad were really good, they had to buy my uniforms at the grammar school and all of that stuff, and they didn't really have the money. Yeah. But they did, because my mum was very, very intelligent lady. She just had the one child, of course, and me. And I got all the help I could from mum. And if I needed, because when you went in grammar school, you had to have the grammar school uniforms, you had to have all your shorts and jumpers for rugby and things like that, and it was expensive for my parents, but really got me through it. So but I did say I got the sixth form, and generally you would then go on to university, but I knew that's it, because they were struggling just to keep me in the grammar school and get the uniforms, and as you're growing, you get having to buy another uniform,
Yeah. So keep going. I'm just checking it's still recording. So then that's obviously a sort of a value that you brought to when you were raising your own kids, that education was key.
And Ina was a very intelligent lady as well. She had a terrible father. And she had a wonderful mother. And now grandmother and grandfather were pretty good, and that mother went to live with her parents. And Ina's brother was a really nice guy. Ken was his name, and I can't remember what disease he got, but and how old he was, but he died very young. He was a really nice guy.
Parkinson's, I remember Ken.
Yeah, that's. These sort of things. you're lucky that don't catch sort of things like that. You're lucky in life that you get to the 90s and stuff. Oh yeah, I always feel so good because I lived and was born in a working class area, and but I must have got my mum's intelligence because she was a very, very intelligent woman. She was she obviously married my dad, obviously, and he was a hard worker, but he didn't have the intelligence that mum had. And they call her in those the proper name is Agnes, and they call my mum Agnes. But you know what they shorten it to? Aggie.
Yeah.
Aggie. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
So she was Aggie.
Yeah.
My dad was just James, and he was Jim.
So if you can't see on the video, if anyone's watching this, we're currently sat in Granddad's apartment in City Beach, which is one of the nicer areas of Perth, and we've got a fantastic view of the ocean here. So come a long way from the one bedroom in Newcastle to
yes.
this.
You've got to work for it, but you've also got a bit of luck here and there. And I think we got lucky. Yeah.
Well,
Mind, we didn't know where all these children were coming from.
Kept rocking up, didn't they? Yeah. It happens.
Yes. No,
Well, can we fast forward a bit then? I mean, you've won this OBE from your time at the Phosphate Commission. But the details of that story. So
well, basically, it was a difficult sort of thing. The Ocean Island, that was getting towards the end of the phosphate, and the people who had been taken by the Japanese as prisoners, I could never find out what. It was quite a way after the war was finished, but they came in hordes back to their island where they had been the people from the island. But the war had all, they got taken Japanese prisoners by the Japanese. I don't know that there was a big gap, and I never ever found out what but they were people who homes were on Ocean Island, and they came in, and without seeing me, they started smashing up all the gear.
when was this? What year was this?
Because it's my island, it's our island, and you're doing phosphate. What we don't know what phosphate is, sort of thing. So I eventually got a few of the leaders and explained, you can't do this. Look, and we had one policeman on Ocean Island. He had to send to the hinterland, and he got more police in, and they started to arrest the islanders who would. I don't know, there was a gap, I don't know how the gap was, they invaded it, and they were smashing up the gear, and so they had to be stopped. But I was manager there, and I obviously had to stop them, not try and stop them. Well, I did stop them, and by that time they'd sent police and they arrested them, and I think, wow, here's me, a top job and earning money, and ladies who, the husbands had been away for, and now the husbands have been arrested. So I got them together, the husbands that hadn't left the island. And I said, look, I'm sorry all of this happened, but you were smashing everything up, and we had to do something about it. And look, you've been arrested. I asked the police that I wanted to talk to the one the police weren't there. I said, well, you know, you've been arrested and you're going to take it on the hinterland, but I guarantee that your wives and children will be looked after. And then they start thanking me. And they smashed it all of it. Not all of it. It was some of it. They smashed it, and they had a feeling, right? Look at all these people, because all the Western people that would, like me, the engineers and the foremen, and you know, good salaries, and there's this island. There's always almost mined out, and they start smashing it, of course. And what they did do when they got arrested, that's why I had to get the police in, you know, and they did call me, and the policemen were good, and the group of the guys asked the police if they wanted to talk to me, and so I went, and what they wanted to do, they sort of apologised at what they smashed up, but not really. But what they wanted is me to give them a guarantee that I would look after their wives and children, and of course I did. But they were arrested and taken up to the I can't remember the name of the country that was the mainland. That I was sent to the mainland because they had to be tried before a court, because they'd been smashing up, you know, half of the island, and we'd nearly been finished. It was not so far that we were fast right, but we would finished, not mining. But there was still some phosphate there when they did it, and they were sort of nice guys when they told me before they left and asked me to look after their wives and children, because they were just getting arrested. It was a bit of a sad situation, because they'd been in the prisoners of war. They'd come to their island, and here's the phosphate was mined out, the phosphate rock, and they haven't got any more. And you couldn't sort of blame them for being angry in a sense. But
was there a phosphate mine there before the war when these guys had been taken?
I think so, yes.
Yeah.
It's the strangest thing is Ocean Island, Nauru was the biggest, but it had all been mined out, and Ocean Island, and it's all on the same latitude, hundreds and hundreds of miles apart. But in Christmas Island was nearly mined out, and Ocean Island was the last one. Nauru had been mined out before I even started mining. But it's for even me, it's difficult to work out the three islands like this, hundreds of miles. It's the latitude that must be was the same, exactly the same. How on earth did they phosphate rock, and phosphate rock in these two islands? It's
So what year was this that this happened? Like, how long had these guys been off of the island for before they came back?
well, they'd been off the island during the war, so they were taken prisoners of war by the Japanese, and because the Japanese occupied the islands.
Yeah.
So that was sort of 1940 or something.
Yeah.
They took, but there had been the guy that Christmas Island had never ever had native occupation. The first one, Christmas Island, not on the western side of it all. Ocean Island did, and Nauru did have occupants.
Is that what these guys were? So the local population on Ocean Island that have been taken.
Yes, because they were taken prisoners. Yeah.
So then what year was this when they had come back to the island and they were?
Actually, it is a long. It's strange.
Like the 70s.
Yeah, because the war finished in 1945, and I was not on the islands until
Into the 60s, 70s.
1960, 1939, 59, 60, 67 or something, in 1967, because I was, going on, around 30. And the Ocean Island had never been occupied. Sorry, Christmas Island had never been occupied. One guy found it, and there was nobody there. It's just an unoccupied island, and yet it was full of phosphate, the same as Nauru was, and the same as Ocean Island was.
So it took these guys 22 years from the end of World War II until they made their way back to Ocean.
Yeah. I don't know what.
So then,
Yeah.
right. And then they all rocked up together, and they found that the mine was just about empty. And then what? So basically, a riot started.
Yes. Oh, yeah. It was there. We looked up. One thing we could have done. Well, they sort of started. Christmas Island wasn't occupied, so that's it. Nauru was already mined out. So only Ocean Island that we were still mining phosphate, and it wasn't long to go. So the money wasn't there because it was more or less mined out. And what we did do was try to do to convince them that we will house you and we will have a job and wives and children will be looked after. But you see, I wasn't. I don't know if they ever got in charge or in touch with top management of the Phosphate Commission. I told them they could get in touch with them, but they just went on breaking up the gear, on the island, and I couldn't really persuade them to stop it, and you have to get the basic, to stop them. And all I could do was when they got arrested because they were smashing up, all I could do was promise them I would look after their family and kids. And they were appreciative of that. But they were a bit angry, but when we talked about it, they said, "Oh, we're pleased to hear you and do that, and sorry about what we've done," or whatever. It was a nice conversation, but they had to, they had to be charged for what they've done. And
how long did this riot last for then? Like, if there was only one.
Well, we only had one truck.
It must have taken, this riot must have gone on for a couple of days, right?
Oh, yes. They smashed a lot of gear. Fortunately, they would nearly have mined out. We still had enough gear to, once they, were taken away, we still had enough gear that we could repair and finish the mining, because it was towards the end of the phosphate on that island, Christmas Island, they finished. And,
so basically for 3 days or so, they had complete control over the island that they were
smashing things up.
Were they
equipment and stuff?
Like, were people getting hurt or anything? Or?
Oh no. That is good. The people who weren't part of the island, Ocean Island, had been occupied, but there were workers that weren't Ocean Islanders. They were a bit frightened, and but they took it well, and the guys that had lived on the island, they would smashed up a bit of the equipment, but they didn't hurt anybody. They didn't. And I told the guys that the working class, whatever, were nearly finished mining, to be honest. But I just told them, don't try to stop them. It's not your fault. It's not your bother, because I knew if they stop them, they'll be fighting each other. And that wouldn't be any good at all. And but again, the people that have come from the Japanese prisoners, eventually the Ocean Island authorities, the government, if you like to call it, had to have them arrested and charged, and they were tried on the mainland, and they I don't know that they got very big charges, because I was trying to be sympathetic anyway, and but what I did do, I've forgotten how much they were charged, and sent to jail. I can't remember, but all I did was say, don't you worry about your women, wife and children. Don't worry about it. I think it was only a short time, because you're going to get 6 months or a year, whatever it was. I can't remember. I'll be looking after your wives and children. And by that time they'd calmed down and just after talking to them, and it was sad, but it was in the end, they went back to the island, because the island had finished mining anyway. We was close to finish the mining, and we left there, but the families had established themselves, and I think the British Phosphate Commissioners did a lot of care. I don't know if they handed out money, but I think they tried to care to put the island back to what the people we used to before it was mined, sort of thing. Because of the wives and children and the guys, and I think they had to put them in jail, but I think they had very small what's the word,
sentences.
Yeah. But,
that's in a big part because they didn't hurt any people, right? Like,
no, they didn't. No, and it was their island, and they'd been prisoners of war. You got to have sympathies, but they did smash up the.
So this is where sort of like your leadership sort of came in that you weren't trying to protect the property, and you kind of understood where they were coming from, and that's what stopped the whole thing escalating into something where people actually got hurt, right?
No, nobody got hurt. No, no, not at all. It's because I made sure. I mean, I tried to stop them smashing up. Well, it did stop. They smashed a few of the machines and the diggers and stuff like that, but they were just showing their anger. It was their home. It was their island. And they'd been in a bloody prisoner of war under the Japanese, so they wouldn't be very pleasant with it.
No, that's one of the worst places.
There was something I think of it to them.
But
we got together, and in the end, I said, look, I look after the ladies and the children, and they were thankful for that, even though they were going to jail.
Well,
It was. I think they just had short. I can't remember the figures, but they weren't going to get 5 years in jail. 3 months or something.
3 months. Yeah, because they just knocked over a couple of diggers and that sort of thing. So
yes, it's.
So what happens once you get nominated for an OBE? What
I was policeman's punched, I suppose. But it's the thing I remember most. Queen Elizabeth was the Queen, and she said, it's wonderful to see you, and a little bit of sort of introduction. And she said, well, it's, what she said, I don't know very much about these sort of phosphate islands. They're just sort of a long way from meaning. What are they like? And, well, I tried to answer in a very short stage because I couldn't go through it all. And I said, well, they did a wonderful job because phosphate is a very, very needy for farmers, for fertilizers, and I just did what I was meant to do, and I think we produced a lot of phosphate, and it's been pretty good. I didn't put in all these sort of people. Oh, and the people, and she said, "Oh, what about the people?" So then, I've heard that they've been prisoners of war, and I said, "Oh, they're wonderful people. They've just settled down and happy to be back, and hopefully they will be happy to be back." Because I wasn't going to tell them that they were smashing up to tell her. They were smashing up some of the things. It was a difficult, he was telling lies to a degree. But you had to be sympathetic about these guys. I mean, they'd been prisoners of war of the Japanese and come back to the island, and half of it is built up.
Yeah.
And also we're taking all the money out and we're leaving.
Yeah. Yes,
What I'm hearing is that you lied to the Queen. Right.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, she asked me, it was
Not many people have lied to the Queen, have they, Grandad?
it was just to get. I got an OBE, I think it's called, isn't it? Yeah. You know what OBE as well? I don't know who started it, but I think it's just a general thing. Or the buggers' efforts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Order of the British Empire is what it really is.
Yeah.
So, but it was, I was pleased with the way. And the Queen asked, little questions about the island, so she hadn't been with them, obviously. When I was getting that over the years, so other buggers' efforts.
You go to Buckingham Palace, or you go to?
Yes.
Yeah, well,
Nina was in the audience, and the people were getting medals. So, the Queen, she really, well, she was a very, very intelligent woman. I've always thought of that, not because she gave me the medal. I think the Queen was as good as any person that had been the king or queen. She was a wonderful woman. And she again, just the way she put an interest in the questions, that she really was interested. She says, "Oh, I don't know anything much about those islands, but I think she knows that she knew it was phosphate islands, and that's what I was getting an OBE for, and because she has to be told why." I mean, she wasn't, And the Queen, but I'm not just saying it because I got an OBE. She wasn't really, from her whole life, Queen Elizabeth, she was a good. She did well for a lot of people. Yeah, let's put it that way. She was still royalty. I mean, she had a good life. She was, went through hard times. Because of her husband, or was it the father? George V. He had a stutter, and he was the father, really. And then she had, it was a very the royalty was in a very difficult stance at that time, because a lot of people would have their rights, and some people didn't want royalty, you know, some people in England, so the buggers, you know, they're just living their life of Riley and that sort of thing. And other people think that they gave the country a good stance, you know, it's how people view it. Even though I came from a working class family, and but the fact that a father as well, you know, the Queen Elizabeth, I thought was a wonderful queen. Her father, George V, I think it was difficult for Ronald because he had a stutter. That's what he couldn't make a speech or anything. It was awful for the royal family because he was the king. but Elizabeth, he didn't live to a very young age. I can't remember if she was Queen Elizabeth when she was relatively young. Yeah, and she was a good queen throughout. If you royalty is strange, isn't it? I mean, amongst working class people, naturally, you know, these people are rich and within the life of royalty. But if you get somebody like the Queen, Queen Elizabeth, she puts life into royalty by caring for the people in the country. She was always like that, wondering and what can we do for the people here, for the people here, for the people here. She was that sort of a woman, I think. And her father, he wasn't really a king because he couldn't, but he had this study, but he was born king, so he had to take his term. It showed that I think the father being like that showed sympathy for royalty because he wasn't the you know, he wasn't high on the king, you know, sort of thing. And you know, his daughter was a pretty good thing. You know,
Look, I mean, that's probably the story.
yeah.
Is there any, you know, the idea of putting this video together, is this just something for, you know, all the cousins to sort of see when they're the right age? So
yeah, I don't know if it adds to it or, you know, it's a lot of rubbish.
no, it's great.
Yeah.
Well, before I turn it off, is there any, I don't know, what's your biggest piece of advice that you would give to, you know, all of the cousins, you know, the next generations coming
Yeah.
through? What's
Well, first of all, it depends on what your objectives are, and your objectives is sometimes because of your nature, and you can't help that. I mean, and it then tells you if you want to do this, you've got to work hard. But it doesn't mean, that everybody else is a lazy bugger. That's not right. It's just something in you that you get a job and you do the job that you think you've got to do, and you get a next job and the next job and so on, and then somebody puts you in some other position because you've done such a good job. But I've always, my mother was very, very intelligent. My dad was a really nice guy, but he did not be intelligent with his life. And I got some of it from your mother. You get what you get from, you know, and then you've got to put into it. Obviously, you don't just sit back and people give you jobs. but you've got to have a feeling, and I had it. You want to be not knocking other people and be the boss and stuff, but you want to progress. You know, through life, sort of, you know, you start off as an apprentice, as student apprentice, that's what I was called. And then you see what, you know, this job is, this job, and then they build a new factory and you get this job, and you're trying to do your job properly, and then they say, oh, well, you've just been promoted to this sort of thing. And you shouldn't ever sit back and say, great. And I've never tried to do that. But I also don't feel that if I sort of thought, oh, I shouldn't be doing this, you're then wasting energy and wasting other people's lives. If you can help a company to expand or to do the thing properly and to treat people properly, well, you do something that you should be proud of. And if you just said, oh, no, I don't want to do any, well, nothing else would ever be done if the people with the ability, and I never like to say brains, no, the ability, if they just toss their ability away, then they're not doing the right thing. If they've got the ability, you like doing it, yeah, sure, and you like having ability, but if you don't use it to help other people, well, you're doing the wrong thing. If you're just sort of taking in the money and, you know, that sort of thing. And so, but you have a wonderful life because you use what you've got, and you get a good job here and a good job there, and you try to do the job. And I've always tried to be generous to the people who are working for this company, and I'm in charge of them. And the guys and girls that do a good job, you've got to tell them that and give them promotions. And if the people are not doing a good job, well, you have them in and talk to them and talk to them and see if you can persuade them that, you know, you're not doing the right thing. Because you're sure to get that sort of thing. But, you know, the worst thing you can do is say, okay, this and you shouldn't be doing this and get out of here, you know. That's never been me. If somebody's doing really the wrong thing, and you're sure you get the odd guy, most people want to do the right thing at jobs. If there's the odd one, well, you then dismiss him, you know, because he can be affecting the rest of the workforce, you know, with the odd one. It doesn't happen very often. Most people in their jobs do, you know, work as well as they can, and because people are looking for that, you know, getting a better job and getting a better job. And these days, you know, you treat the children that way. And nowadays, I mean, your parents are working their butt out, and my dad was away from home all the time, getting jobs here, there, because he was a semi-skilled roofer. And, but you know, the thing you don't know, when we live in the Western world, and you know, you have a house like this, and a wonderful place, and a wonderful village, and you've done well for yourself, and but when you've come from working class people, you're very working class people, and you appreciate that. But you know, I still don't know, and I think about it a lot. That here's Europe, and there's you know, 20 different countries. You read the papers or you watch the telly, and this is doing this, and they're marching and they're killing each other, and it's hard to get through your head. Well, you know, I was in a working class situation, but I know that I got the intelligence from my mother, and nobody gives you what you've got up here. You're just lucky to be born like that sort of thing. So, but a lot of other people haven't got that. They've just been dig a hole in the ground, sort of thing. And you've got to appreciate that if you don't work on it, then you're wasting your time because you're wasting the intelligence that you've got. But if you work on it and it helps other people at the same time, I've always thought that. Yeah, sure, you benefit because you keep getting better salaries or whatever. You can't say, "Oh, I don't want that salary. I don't want that salary." Obviously, you don't do that. But as long as you're doing some things that are helping other people, that are workers below you, that's all you can do. Yeah, and in fact, if you say, "Oh, it's the hell of this job," you're not doing your part in life. If you've got the what's not attitude, you got the ability, to do something. Well, if it helps other people that haven't got the ability, well, they need help. And if you don't do it, then nobody will have any ability, and nobody will get better. It's but the other, I know the poor workers. I mean, my parents were workers, and my grandparents were even more workers. But they didn't look upon it like that. But today, there's a number of people think, "Oh, those bastards, they're just sitting doing nothing," But and I can understand it, and I don't know that all of these little countries all around Europe and North Africa and stuff. You see it on TV. I mean, people are marching and stuff like that, but you don't really know how bad or how good the life is, do you? It's and the worst of it is we have had a good life like this, but I don't think there's enough wealth in the world for everybody to have a good life like this. I don't know whether it's possible. It's so you're just lucky to have it like this. And all you can do is try to help the other people, and I do it by giving 10 quid or 20 quid to some charity or whatever. You don't give an awful lot away, but I've always tried to do something, to help, but you can't help foreign countries that are running terribly, because you see it on the TV and you get shocked. The Western world seems still pretty good, but I don't know these tiny European countries and even South America and South Africa, and you don't know, do you? It's
Great.
Yes.
Okay. Well, look, I'll turn it off there, but there was quite a bit in that last answer. I think responsibility, empathy, bunch of different stuff.
It's
Alrighty. Cool. Let's leave that there.